So Eddie had worked with the actor who was talking when Lincoln got shot.
What? Hi guys, welcome back to the season finale of Interval Conversations. I'm very excited today as I have one of my all-time favourite Broadway performers. That's right, we've gone international now. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Rob McClure. So Rob, how are you doing?
Nathan, I'm so good. You didn't tell me I was your season finale. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, season finale. So,
well, thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Now, for those of you who don't know Rob, and if you don't, look him up. He's absolutely incredible. Could you tell us how you first got involved in this wonderful industry?
Of course, sure. I started out in high school, and not because I thought I was any better or worse than anyone at it. It was another extracurricular thing to put on a college resume. It was like, oh, I'll do the bowling team in the winter and the play in the spring. And I quickly fell in love with the collaborative nature of it. I remember my friends were relying on me in a way that I had never been relied on before. You know, if you fail a test, that's on you. But if you screw up the play, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to say, how you're supposed to sing or dance, you make everyone else look foolish. And I loved that I had that type of responsibility and that type of camaraderie with my friends, that we were all committed to doing this magical thing together. And we all cry on closing night, even though we're going to see each other in homeroom the next day. So what was that about? What had we been through that we had connected in such a profound way? And that's what I really fell in love with. Then I saw a community theater production of Sweeney Todd, and the surprise ending of Sweeney Todd happened. And I remember thinking, tomorrow there's going to be another audience here who doesn't know that's coming. I have to be there to see them see what I saw. And I saw every performance of Sweeney Todd at the Bergen County Players in Oradell, New Jersey. At $12 a pop, I rode my bike. And I knew I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't know whether I would be on stage or off. I just knew I needed to be around where that was happening. So I joined that community theater, and I ran lights and ran sound and ran wardrobe, and they put me in some of the shows. I worked in the box office. I did house management. I fell in love and started auditioning. And my Broadway debut was a show called I'm Not Rappaport, which was a play with Judd Hirsch and Ben Vereen in 2002. And then Avenue Q was a big break for me in 2006. I ended up doing Avenue Q for 3 years, which led to now Mrs. Doubtfire being my 8th Broadway show 20 years later.
You've mentioned like your Broadway debut, Mrs. Doubtfire, of course, as the title role, and Avenue Q. Could you tell us about some of the in-between shows as well, obviously on Broadway? Because I don't know if
of course, yeah.
Something Rotten, Beetlejuice.
Yeah. So I'm Not Rappaport was the first. Avenue Q was the next. Chaplin was the third, and sort of a if people say a breakout role, that was certainly the one for me. I got a Tony nomination for Chaplin, which is an astonishing privilege and something that changed my life, and I'm so unbelievably grateful for. And then I did Jason Robert Brown's Honeymoon in Vegas, Something Rotten, which was a thrill. That show is such a joy factory. I just cherish it. The Noise is Off revival for Roundabout Theater Company. Beetlejuice, which is who gets to wrestle a sandworm 8 shows a week on Broadway. The most fun ever. And now Mrs. Doubtfire. I think that was all 8. Rappaport, Chaplin, Avenue Q, Honeymoon in Vegas, Noise is Off, Something Rotten, Beetlejuice, Mrs. Doubtfire. That's the 8. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant repertoire of
Thank
shows under your name.
But I'm a lucky man.
Yeah. Do you have any personal highlights from those shows, like people you've worked with?
Oh,
memories.
Gosh. I mean, there are so many. What a real life moment for me was the day when Chaplin's family came to see Chaplin.
Oh, wow.
some of his grandchildren and their families. And there's always a responsibility when you're playing a historical figure, but when kids who used to play with grandpa are now coming to see the show about grandpa, you really feel like you need to get it right.
Yeah.
And there was a beautiful clip at the end of our show of the little tramp character walking off into the sunset, doing the traditional Charlie Chaplin little tramp walk, or the tramp shuffle, as we called it in the show. And it was projected onto this large screen. And 2 days after the family had seen it, the composer forwarded me an email from Chaplin's granddaughter, Kiera. And it said, "Hey, what movie was that clip from? Because we've spent all weekend trying to find that beautiful clip of him walking off into the sunset." And it was me. We filmed it on a field in La Jolla, California, when we did the out-of-town tryout in California. And the notion that even for a moment they might have thought that was him. I got that email 2:00 in the morning, and I cried till about 4:00 in the morning. That was a big life moment for me, where I felt like I had really done something special. So that was definitely a big highlight. And then, of course, Beetlejuice. There's footage of me online, and I've got plenty at home, of me doing the Deo dance around my dining room table when I was 9 years old. I mean, Beetlejuice was a huge influence on me. So to be on stage and to have Catherine O'Hara come and see the show and get to come backstage and talk to her afterward and hang out with her, and she could not have been lovelier. And actually how that came about was that she had, our producers approached her about introducing our number on the Tony Awards. And she graciously said yes, but she said, "Oh, the Tonys are this Sunday. I have to see the show first." And they said, "We really appreciate that. Don't feel like you have to." And she said, No. If I'm going to introduce it, I want to be legit. I want to have seen it." And she saw it and was so moved that she completely rewrote the intro that they gave her to be her own experience about having come see it. So she could not have been cooler, and she hung out with us backstage for a good hour afterward, just talking about the film and her experience with it. And those are moments where I have to pinch myself. There's been dozens over the years. One of them that is kind of my all-time favorite backstage moment of my life thus far. It was actually my first professional show, and it was in the ensemble of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Carousel at a theater called the Paper Mill Playhouse. And I was 19 at the time, and I was sharing a dressing room with an 86-year-old character actor, wildly famous in the early days of MGM and Judy Garland. And his name is Eddie Bracken. If you Google him, you'll go, "Oh my God, it's that guy." For people in our generation, he's easiest to remember as either Wally from Wally World and National Lampoon's Vacation, or when in Home Alone 2, when Macaulay Culkin goes to that magical toy store and the little old man gives him 2 turtle doves and tells him to keep one and give one to someone very special. That's Eddie Bracken. That type of career where he was in thousands of films, and every time you see him, you go, "Oh, that guy, I love that guy." And we were sharing a dressing room, and I couldn't believe that they were allowing me to share a dressing room with Eddie Bracken. And he said, "Oh, this will be fun. When I started as a child actor, I shared a dressing room with a man who was in his 90s then." And I said, "Oh, wow, that's amazing." And he said, "Yeah, that actor's name was Harry Hawk. Do you know who that is?" And I said, "No." And he said, "That was the actor who was speaking in the play Our American Cousin when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at the Ford's Theater." So Eddie had worked with the actor who was talking when Lincoln got shot.
What?
And I think, yeah, exactly. I had never heard the Lincoln assassination told as a backstage anecdote before. But yeah, so now, of course, I love to say I worked with a guy who worked with the guy who was talking when Abraham Lincoln
Didn't mention
was
that in
assassinated.
Assassins.
Yeah, exactly. Just that's my all-time favorite backstage moment.
Really, you've worked with some quite prolific people on Broadway as well, like Beetlejuice. You worked with Alex Brightman, Kerry Butler, Leslie.
Yeah.
What was it What was it like working with Alex Brightman? Because he is, from what I've seen, he is a ball of energy.
Yeah, he is one of my dearest friends, and we've actually known each other for over 10 years now. We were sort of weaving in and out of each other's lives for a while. We did a lot of workshops of new shows when we were both sort of coming up in the industry, and we knew of each other, and every now and then we would get to spend 2 weeks here or there helping to create a new piece together in a rehearsal room, and we always got a kick out of each other. So when we finally booked an actual show together, it was a long time coming, and we were both super excited to work together. And the thing I love about Alex, because he and I are very similar in this way, is that he uses rehearsal to try anything. Rehearsal for Alex Brightman is not about repetition. Rehearsal for Alex Brightman is about trying each and everything that your brain will throw against the wall. So every time we run a scene, it's going to be different. And every time we get to a joke, he might say a different joke. But it's about exploration. So by the time Alex does land in front of an audience, he has mined gold out of every single moment because he has explored all of the options. And he also has this really remarkable skill in making the audience feel like he's a live wire and very unpredictable, while being amongst the most consistent performers I've ever worked with. The audience is convinced that he does that show completely differently every night, and that's not true. He's just remarkable at making you think that he is creating and living inside of every moment. He is wildly spontaneous while being the most consistently astonishing and committed and reliable performers that I've ever worked with.
That's brilliant. 'Cause that sort of leads us on to our next couple of questions. So, obviously, you mentioned Alex. He just tries out every different possibility, this sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
what is your character development throughout rehearsals? Like, how do you prepare for a role?
Um, I teach a lot, and in acting and in teaching for the last 20 years, I've sort of developed a bit of a checklist that was originally inspired by a great acting teacher I worked with named John Housley. And I've dubbed it Oprah, like Oprah Winfrey, OPRAH. And that stands for objective, place, relationship, activity, and history. And anytime I feel disconnected or not fully human, not completely engaged in the moment of the scene, it's usually because I haven't explored one or more of the objective, place, relationship, activity, and history of what's going on in that moment in time. And the more I flesh out every one of those aspects of that character, the more human that character becomes, and the more driven and the higher the stakes, and the more alive I feel in those moments, because people know those things. Right now, I know my objective is to engage and to share and to communicate. My place is in my living room, where I'm the most comfortable. My relationship with you goes back about 8 minutes. Uh, my activity is that I have my iPad balanced on a couple of my daughter's toys on my coffee table, and my history is my entire life history leading up to this very moment in time, and that all shapes what and how I'm communicating with you right now. So treating my characters with the same sort of detail as I would anybody else.
When you take on some well-known characters as well, so looking at Adam Maitland, Beetlejuice, Mrs.
Yeah,
Doubtfire, uh, is
yeah,
there a slightly different approach you take for those? Because obviously there's films out them. So do
yeah,
you watch the
yeah.
film to go, oh, I can do that, I can do this, or do you go, I'm gonna try something else?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because I am as big a fan of the original Beetlejuice film and the Mrs. Doubtfire film as anyone. So I am with the fans in the fact that I don't want the new version to break my concept of that world. I need it to I need it to grow. I want the show to inflate my love of that universe, not pop it. And so I feel a responsibility to both my own affection for those films and the audience to remain true to the to not the performance. It's not so much about imitation of either voice or body or style or choice. Um, but the thing that I do feel a responsibility to engage with is how the film made me feel. I want to make the audience feel the way Robin Williams' Mrs. Doubtfire made me feel. And if I can tap into that source, I know that the audience will trust me with Mrs. Doubtfire. And that's ultimately what I need. I need, within a few lines of Euphigenia Doubtfire arriving on Broadway, the audience needs to drop their shoulders and go, we trust this guy with Mrs. Doubtfire. Because if they never cross that bridge, they're never going to live in the world of our show. But if I can convince them that I'm going to treat it with the respect and the love and the fandom that they have, then they'll let me take her somewhere new. So by the middle of Act 2, when our show has has really gone off the rails from what you expect from the film, while weaving its way back to familiarity later, the audience will go with me on that journey as Mrs. Doubtfire. There's not a resistance because I'm playing against the warm and fuzzy compartment of their heart that has a certain expectation. So it's a fine line. It's a balancing act for sure, but one that's not rooted in imitation as much as it is honoring the original performances.
Because what would you class as the hardest thing about work, not necessarily on Broadway, but in the world of theatre as well? So what would you class as hard in that essence?
Oh gosh, hard in what respect?
So the performance schedules, the rehearsals, the
Yeah,
tech
sure,
rehearsals.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I would say that the, what is really hard about um, being blessed with a long run of a show is remembering that you have to give the audience the opening night performance every time, and it might be your 780th performance of Something Rotten, but in that audience is, let's say, a 13-year-old girl who has obsessed over the Something Rotten cast album since it came out and has been begging her parents to fly to New York City to finally see her favorite Broadway show. And that family has saved for the thousands of dollars it will take to fly that family of 5 from Illinois to New York City, get a hotel room, feed them for a weekend, entertain them all weekend, and get 5 really great seats to her first Broadway show, which is Something Rotten. And if that is my 720th performance of Something Rotten, and I treat it as such, that is so profoundly unfair to that singular experience for that family. And remembering that every audience is full of those families. It is always someone's first show ever, and it's always someone's last show ever. And it may be my 780th, but it cannot be treated as such. And always remembering how unbelievably lucky we are to do what we do, and how many thousands of people wait in line to try and do what we do. And we were the lucky ones who were picked for whatever reason. That keeps my head screwed on tight and keeps me giving the performance that those families deserve.
That was a brilliant way. Well, that was brilliant.
Thank you.
So sticking with theatre again, one thing that goes hand in hand with live performances are mishaps. Do you have
Oh
any
yeah.
onstage mishaps from over the years?
I mean, the wonderful thing about live theater is that there are mishaps at every single performance. It's just about hiding them from the audience or making them think that it's been intentional. But 2 come to mind, one that is really fun and one that is not. Um, there was one performance of Avenue Q where the actress who I was playing opposite, there's a really sweet song called Mixtape where I arrive at her apartment because I've made her a mixtape of love songs. And my line, I enter and I go, "Oh, hi, Kate Monster." And she turns and goes, "Hi, Princeton." And the actress turned to me and said, "Hi, Princeton." And she had a nosebleed that was down her face, across her mouth, down her chin, down her neck, and on her shirt. And also at risk of getting on the puppet, which if you've worked on Avenue Q is the #1 priority.
Very
They are
expensive
the stars
puppets.
of the show. Exactly. And she knew her nose was bleeding, but she didn't know how bad until I entered and she saw the expression on my face when I saw her. At which point she and her puppet turned front and said, "My nose is bleeding, I have to stop." Walked off the stage, at which point our stage manager, who had not heard her confess and show the audience that her face was covered in blood, said, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to technical difficulties," which got a wonderful laugh. And they threw an ice pack on her nose for 10 minutes and we carried on. But one of the wonderful things about mishaps is that any time there's ever been a mishap in any show I've ever worked on, the moment you begin again or you fix the problem, you will never have an audience more on your side than them having seen you go through something traumatic and come out the other side and show must go on, right? That there is no greater audience than one that has seen you overcome a difficulty. And one of those moments was in Honeymoon in Vegas. There was sort of a perfect technical storm that ended with my colleague Bryn O'Malley. There's a moment in the opening number where we both walk downstage to the center, the downstage center spot. We break off from each other and loop around the outside of the stage and meet again upstage center all the way toward the back wall. And we walked down to the audience. We parted ways. We looped around the back. And when I got to the top of the stage, she wasn't there anymore. And I turned around and I'm looking for my co-star who I'm singing to. And I noticed that the downstage center trapdoor is open. And it had opened. And Bryn O'Malley had fallen 9-some feet into the orchestra pit because of a perfect technical storm that was no one's fault in particular. But they had figured out later what had happened and of course fixed it. But it was one of those moments where Bryn describes it as, everything slowed down to the point where she was able to think, okay, how do people tell you to fall? Soft knees and roll onto your butt. And she remarkably did. The show stopped for about 5 minutes. They wrapped her ankle. She finished the show, then went to the hospital and found out that she had a really bad sprain and took a couple of performances off to fix it. But the audience seeing her come back on with a wrapped ankle, I mean, there is nothing more thrilling. I mean, poor Bryn shouldn't have had to endure that. But anytime there is sort of a triumph of that nature in front of an audience, you will never get a more grateful or thrilled audience than one that has seen what live theater is all about. Now, by no means is it about anyone getting hurt, but it is about the fact that anything could happen and that this performance will happen once. And it's in front of you tonight. And that thrill is part of what's so great. And that goes for Mrs. Doubtfire as well. One of the things that makes Mrs. Doubtfire an absolute thrill to watch live is that the audience knows that when they watch the film and Robin Williams runs into the restroom and comes out 18 seconds later as Mrs. Doubtfire, that they yelled cut and he went into a trailer for 5.5 hours. On Broadway, if I've got 18 seconds, I've got 18 seconds. And the audience knows I've got 18 seconds. And they're watching me try and make this change. So I can feel the audience sweat with me in that wonderful way that live farce creates. And you don't get that sort of raised stakes for the audience when they know that movie magic is happening. In theater, it's all real. And that's... if you're looking for a high-stakes comedy, that really serves us well.
Because I have to ask about Mrs. Doubtfire as well. So obviously you've got all the
Yeah.
prosthetics and stuff to go on.
Yes.
What is
Yeah.
backstage like during that change?
It looks like the pit stops in the Indianapolis 500, where the car sort of pulls in, and there's 9 people who come in with 8 different drills and go and take the tires off and put the new tires on and go out. That's really what it looks like. I have an army of people who help me, um, and I have 3 dressers and 1 hair and makeup person on every change. The 4 of them are always right there the second I break the wing from the audience, and they are remarkable at what they do. It's so interesting. People often ask me what the difference is between Broadway and performing in your high school. For me, what I'm trying to do and succeed at doing is actually the same. The biggest difference is that everyone around me is at the top of their game, from my spotlight operator to the house manager to my hair and makeup team. So that's the real joy, is that when I come off and I have 18 seconds to turn from Daniel Hillard into Euphigenia Doubtfire, and I have the 4 best people in the world to be able to pull that off surrounding me, that's when I feel like I'm on Broadway. Because without those people and their expertise, there's no way I'd be able to pull off what they're asking me to do.
Because I saw all like the promos that got released and stuff. I was like,
Yeah.
He's not got much time to do that. So
Yes. Yes.
So it must have been like trialing that change up must have been so scary. I can't imagine how many times you had to run it.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where you only get to make a first impression once. And our director, Jerry Zaks, was not convinced that we would be able to pull off prosthetics on Broadway in the amount of time that we needed to pull them off. And I kept on saying to him, it's really important to me that her face not be my face. And he said, no, I understand, but listen, we can only do what we can do. And if it's impossible to do it that quick, because if we're talking about adhesive, are we talking about like, how long do we have? You can't leave the stage for 8 minutes every time we've got to get you in and out of this thing. It's just not the way the story goes. So he said, let's try it. And we went and we got these extraordinary prosthetics made. And we probably did 7 or 8 iterations of the prosthetics before we figured out exactly right what was going to work well for us. But they kept on asking me in rehearsal, do you want to wear the prosthetics? The next time we do a run through, do you want to try the prosthetics? And I kept on saying, no. Meanwhile, every bathroom break, I was running into the other room and putting on the prosthetic and taking off the prosthetic and putting on the prosthetic and taking off the prosthetic. So the first time I showed the restaurant scene, the infamous restaurant scene where he's going back and forth to Jerry Zaks, I had rehearsed it so many times, not in front of him, that the first impression was pulling it off, because I knew if I didn't pull it off, he would doubt that it was possible. So I made sure that the first time I do it in front of the director, it goes well. And I was lucky in that it did, and that the prosthetics kept getting nuanced and perfected. And once I convinced him that it was possible, then they doubled down on making them perfect. And it's been a thrill.
Because one thing as well, moving off Miss Doubtfire and the makeup, throughout lockdown, you were providing everyone with some entertainment in the form of Conductor Cam. So
Yes.
Could you tell us about how that came about?
Certainly. I've always been enamored with conductors. I have memories as a kid with a pencil and conducting the cassette recording that I had of the Lion King movie soundtrack. There was that great piece of music for the Stampede in Lion King, that I just remember that being thrilling to listen to as a kid. And I would wave a pencil in my hand with no knowledge of meter or time signature, or just in the sort of Fantasia way where Mickey Mouse feels like the music is shooting out of his fingertips. Like there's something that makes me feel like Gandalf when I'm conducting. It feels like the music is coming out of you. And I've always thought it was really cool. And then over doing this for 20 years, you can start to notice that certain conductors have certain eccentricities, and they have different conducting patterns and ways of cueing actors in and out, whether it be a big sniff before your downbeat or whatever it may be. All of these wonderful inside things. So backstage at Beetlejuice, I would jokingly conduct the introduction to our show, or as the overture. And Alex Brightman would just howl. The two of us would crack up at jokingly doing all of this fake conducting. So the first Conductor Cam I made was truly just to make Alex Brightman laugh. I did it because I thought Alex Brightman would see it and it would make his day, because the two of us just really enjoyed it. And then the next thing I know, these videos were getting millions of views. And I couldn't believe that something that felt so inside was resonating with so many people, not just in the theater, but outside of the theater. And that I clearly am not alone with my fascination with conductors. So I ended up making, gosh, I think I'm up to 14 now. And they pivoted slightly when at the height of sort of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. We pivoted slightly to try and do one. Basically, I was thinking, oh, I really enjoy giving people this sort of temporary relief in these comedic videos. But it seems like social media is a place right now that needs to be focused in its messaging. So I went weeks without doing one because I thought there were more important voices to amplify. And then I decided that maybe it would be a cool way to bait and switch the audience. Maybe I can make them think they were clicking something that was going to make them laugh, and it would end up being something that sort of knocked them on their ass and made them think. And I partnered with a brilliant conductor from Memphis, Tennessee, named Kalina Bavel, a brilliant artist of color who is also a poet and a conductor herself of the Memphis Youth Symphony. And we collaborated on an idea that ended up being pretty powerful. I was really proud of that.
That sort of leads on to our penultimate question. Obviously, this podcast episode won't be here without the fantastic charity Broadway for Racial Justice. So could you please explain to everyone what's been going on, about your Instafun and your battle?
Absolutely. So a good friend of mine, a guy named Brandon Michael Nace, decided to found Broadway for Racial Justice, again, at the height of the sort of the Black Lives Matter movement. And he decided that, if we're going to change the world, we're going to change it inside our own communities. And he started taking a hard look at the theater communities around the country, Broadway included, but not just Broadway, and sort of the systematic racism in the positions of power, and how these shows are made and who ends up being in them. Not just the faces you see on the stage in the show, but how they're being made and everyone from their stage managers to their house managers. Just making sure that it's not just diverse, but that it's equitable. That shows, that it's not just about getting a couple of token Black cast members in your show, but it's about really making sure that how your show is made from the ground up is representative of the country we live in and the people who live in it. And so he decided that he was going to create this incredible organization, and I was proud to help him in any way that I could. And we did this big Instathon last weekend where we raised over $85,000, which he's using for incredible programming that is trailer and producers of color, so that there can be a new influx of people in positions of power who also happen to be BIPOC artists themselves, and can bring their voices to these processes, and hopefully create theater communities all over the country that are more not just diverse but equitable, places where everyone is given the same opportunity to succeed in whatever department it is that they feel their talents lie.
It's such a brilliant chat. Like, I've tuned in to quite a few of your live streams when you were doing them on Instagram. And that's when I contacted you, like, oh, if I donate this, could we do a podcast episode?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was so grateful you did.
Yeah. And you were up against Andrew Barthfeldman from Dear Evan Hansen in this whole
the little blue striped, broken armed liar pants on fire, as I've been calling him.
You were telling me before we start recording, you actually beat him. which,
Yes, I did. I beat Andrew Barthfeldman brutally, and he would not appreciate me saying that, but I did. I kicked his ass. Let's be real. But here's the thing about Andrew Barthfeldman: he is among the most talented, sweet, kind kids, and I say kid because he's a freaking kid. He's like a child. He was in Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway, like while he was supposed to be in high school. He's just wildly gifted, and I had first heard of him because he won something called the Jimmy Awards, which is kind of like the American High School Tony Awards. And someone sent me a message and said, hey, the kid who won the Jimmy Award this year won for singing I Love Betsy in the competition, which is one of the songs that I sang in Honeymoon in Vegas. So I watched it, and this kid was wildly talented. And all of these people started sending me this video of this kid going, look at this kid performing your song. Look at this kid performing your song. So I reached out and I just said, hey, I saw this video. I heard that you won. Well done. Congratulations. You're remarkable. And we hit it off and have been good buddies ever since. So creating the illusion of this rivalry has been a lot of fun.
yeah, but you still won. That's the important thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But I still kicked his butt. Let's be real.
Yeah. So I just have one last question for you, Rob.
Okay.
So what advice do you have for future performers once theatres can reopen?
So two things. One is about the concept of networking. I hate the word networking because I think it implies that if you are in the right place at the right time and you shake the right hand, that is how things happen. And it's not that instantaneous of a gratifying moment. It's a long haul. It's an investment over time that really builds a career and not just a flash in the pan moment for yourself. Networking is actually about every time you are given an opportunity, whether you're asked to run the spotlight in the basement of a church for a play, whether you are asked to run sound in the attic of a community theater. I use all of these examples because they're memories of mine. That every time the door cracks open to you, you are prepared, you are trained, you are great, and you are kind. And if you do all four of those things consistently with any opportunity, no matter how small, the next time the people involved need someone, they'll say, you know who was prepared and trained and great and kind? Rob McClure. And the perfect example of this is when Mrs. Doubtfire came about, I was offered the role without having to audition. Now, there are lots of people who would be immensely pissed off about that and say, that's not fair. I would have loved to audition for that part. He only got it because he's friends with Kevin McCullum, the producer. Well, I'm friends with Kevin McCullum, the producer, because 10 years earlier, I went to an open call for Avenue Q and proved to Kevin McCullum that I was prepared, I was trained, that I would try my best to be great, and that I was kind. And he trusted me with Avenue Q for 3 years. And then he trusted me again with Something Rotten, which I had to audition for again for 3 years. So by the time he's handed the property of Mrs. Doubtfire and needs to entrust it to an actor, he wants to know it's someone who's going to be prepared and trained and great and kind. And that was a decade-long relationship that had to be built before he would trust me with that property. And that, in my mind, is networking. It's not about how good your headshot is and that that you've schmoozed your way to having relationships. These relationships are long earned. The other thing I would say is that I wasted a lot of time emulating the performers that I admired. Anthony Warlow is this sort of remarkable Australian musical theater superstar that I was enamored with in my whole life. And it took some untangling inside myself before I stopped trying to be the next Anthony Warlow and realized that I needed to figure out how to be the first Rob McClure and what is it about me and my unique lens in this world that I can bring to this material. And when I started listening to the singular weirdo voice that is my own mind, that was when the material started to shine in a way that felt singular, that felt like it wasn't another version of what they had seen that day. And not because it was remarkably special, but because it was uniquely me. And so many people are trying to be the next. I'm trying to be the next Ben Platt. I'm trying to be the next Adina Menzel. I'm trying to be the next Adrian Warren. I'm trying to be the next. Um, and in doing so, you don't realize that there are thousands of other people trying to be the next them too. And you all end up getting lost in the same gray cloud of similarity in adapting their styling, and their choices and their, their vocal tones or whatever it is. Um, so as soon as you can, start figuring out who you are and what you do. And that doesn't mean you can't have influences, but it means that those influences and the material need to be filtered through the unique uh, processor that is you. And the more you let that processor be influenced by outside sort of admiration, the less you're giving credit to your own work and your own unique and special uh, ability to create. And that's, if it's uniquely yours, you can guarantee they will have not seen it that day. And I would much rather go into an audition and say, hi, I'm Rob McClure. This is what I do. Either it fits the puzzle piece that you're looking for or it doesn't. But I've got 5 more of these auditions today. I'll see you later. I would much rather go into an audition with that mindset than, oh gosh, how can I trim the edges of my puzzle piece to be the thing they need? Because you end up just looking like all the other puzzle pieces.
That has been some absolutely brilliant advice there. So,
Thanks, Nathan.
Rob, where can people find you? Twitter, Instagram?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at McClure Rob and on Twitter at Rob McClure. Can you tell that at Rob McClure wasn't available on Instagram? That's okay. At McClure Rob on Instagram, at Rob McClure on Twitter. I'm also on Cameo, cameo.com/Rob McClure. If anybody wants me to do shout outs for the holidays, I give proceeds to the Actors Fund and the NAACP empowerment programs through Cameo. And I also teach through a remarkable website called Slow Coach. That's SLOCOACH, Slow Coach, where I'm doing some online teaching as well. And then, of course, at Mrs. Doubtfire, I think it's mrsdoubtfirebroadway.com. And hopefully we'll see you back on Broadway in 2021.
All the links will be below, all those websites. But
Great.
Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully I'll get to see you live one day.
I look forward to it, Nathan. I thank you for your questions, and mostly thank you for your generous donation to Broadway for Racial Justice. It means the world to me. Thanks.
And if you guys are wanting to find out more about Broadway for Racial Justice, there's a link below. And thank you for tuning in to the season finale of Interval Conversations. I'll see you in February.